All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to the opening night of the Free Palestine Summer Series, our expert speaker lineup. My name is Emma Abada. I am one of the co-facilitators of the Free Palestine Summer Series. I'm also one of the people every Saturday for almost 2 years at the pond protesting for a ceasefire in Gaza. And part of how this series came to be was we were out there just feeling really disturbed and disheartened by all of the footage, the pictures and videos that we were seeing coming out of Gaza. And we were wondering how other people were feeling and why not as many people were stopping and talking to us. Sometimes protesters can be a little intimidating, but we realized we were like, a lot of people don't really know what's going on over there. And maybe if they do know something, they're a little bit intimidated or unsure about how to approach the topic because there's a lot of tensions around it, a lot of people claiming anti-Semitism, if you're maybe. And so it's a topic that has been not super easily approachable for people. And so we wanted to put on this series, one, to just start educating people about what's been going on over there, the history, the current situation, but also not just to educate you, because being just educated is quite a privilege to just be like, oh, great, now I'm informed. But we really want to also move you, inspire you into action, because action is what's going to change the situation. We can learn about it all we want, but again, we really want you to take what you learn and do something with it. And so we've got some handouts here that have some suggestions for things you can do. I'm going to highlight a few of the really big ones that I think are important. One of them is we encourage everyone we talk to download the 5 Calls app. And so easy for you. It takes under 5 minutes to call your 2 senators and your congressperson, your representative, and let them know. Every day is the best. If you don't have it in you daily, if you could pick it one day a week where you say, every Tuesday, I'm going to call my Congress people and tell them that I want a ceasefire. I want an arms embargo. I want sanctions. I want the bloodshed to stop. I want my tax dollars to not be going to genocide. And that's really important. Another thing you can be telling them currently right now, there is a global Samud flotilla, which is a compilation of over 50 boats that have come together from over 40 countries. And they're right now sailing to Gaza to try to establish a humanitarian corridor. They are nonviolent. They are carrying humanitarian aid like baby formula, supplies, and they're trying to get it to Gaza because the situation really is that bad. And so that's another thing you can be telling your representatives. I want that flotilla protected, let them establish a corridor, open the borders to allow aid in. Those are some big ones that every Americans, especially when you are calling your Congress people, it's the United States government who really has the ability to push the off button on this whole situation. And it's the citizens that is pushing our representatives to do that that's going to make the difference. And another big thing is boycotting. That's a nonviolent way that you can use the power of your dollars to really affect this situation. We know that this is super effective. That was one of the tipping points for South Africa apartheid when that situation was going on. So you can download the No Thanks app, BDS list, and learn about the companies that the BDS is telling us to boycott from. For example, SodaStream, Chevron, Intel. Those are some of the big ones on the top of the BDS list. So educate yourself on boycotting and be really pestering your representatives about this. That the more we pester, we know that that really does change their votes. In New Mexico, our 2 senators over time have actually started changing their votes on this topic. because we've been calling them hundreds of times. So those are some big ones. I'll let you check out the handouts for some of the other ones, but those are the two that I really, really wanted to highlight for you. Another thing I want to just mention is that the Promised Land Museum, who was created by our speaker tonight, who I'm going to introduce in a second, that is going to nights from 5 to 7 before the next two speakers, Wednesday and Thursday this week. So go check it out. If you didn't have enough time to go finish it all tonight, it'll be up tomorrow and Thursday, and tell all your friends to go check it out. It's a wonderful museum. And I know after you hear our speaker tonight, you're going to be like, wow, everybody needs to hear this stuff. So on that note, I would like to introduce our speaker. Our goal has been to give people a new perspective on Palestine by sharing a broad array of speakers. Tonight, we get to hear a Jewish American perspective on Palestine. Our speaker is a physician, researcher, and professor at Wake Forest University School of Medicine. He has published widely, spoken internationally, and is listed by expertscape.com as the #1. In addition to his medical career, our speaker has dedicated years to researching and writing about justice, ethics, and the Palestinian struggle. Through both his book, Bent Towards Justice, which you can purchase over there, and the online Promised Land Museum, which is next door, he brings a perspective shaped by Jewish tradition, historical study, and perhaps most importantly, firsthand experience. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Steve Feldman.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't hear y'all clapping, but I can see it, which is great. Dr. Abada, thank you so much. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
You just nod. Yeah, excellent. All right. And thank you so much for organizing this. The nice introduction. I want to thank everybody attending. Look, I'm a nerd. You're all in Los Alamos. My chemistry teacher back in the University of Chicago had worked on the Manhattan Project. I'm so nerdy. I own a copy of a letter signed by Einstein, and it's like one of my proud possessions. My goal of this evening is to leave you feeling energized and optimistic about the future. I'm going to share my 3 favorite principles about why there's conflicts. I think if you understand these principles, you'll be optimistic that we can fix things. And this presentation, I understand we have 2 hours. Hopefully we won't need all of it. But I'm going to break it up into several parts. The first part, I'm going to share the lens through which I see the world as a Jewish American. Second, I'll describe how my understanding evolved when I examined the evidence. And third, I'll share why I'm so optimistic about the future and what I believe is bound to happen. Now, if we have time, I'm going to describe my firsthand experiences as a Jewish American who walked the streets of the West Bank on my own in Ramallah. But given the limitations of time, I'm not going to discuss that one time when there was a Palestinian young man who was holding a blade at my neck, unless you ask him about it at the end. All right. Here's part 1, the lens we're looking through, and I'm just going to switch to sharing slides now. And if you're like bored by the slides and think it's better just to do it without, just let me know. Okay. So the lens that we look at things, I think, is critically important. There's the Jewish Torah consists of the Old Testament and further books, and you put it all together, and there's the Talmud. And in the Talmud, there's this fascinating piece of wisdom. It says, we don't see things the way they are. We see them the way we are. And this is critically important so that you understand where I'm coming from. You know, I come from a deeply Jewish background. I went to a Jewish school, Hebrew school growing up. We studied Torah. We studied Bible stories. Moses leading the Jewish people out of Egypt, splitting.
Hey,
Oh,
Steve,
yeah.
I want to stop you for a second. We can see your notes. I just wanted to let you know.
You see my notes?
Yep.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. Do you guys care?
No, I just wanted to let you know.
Okay. That's really interesting. Is it blocking the screen?
No, no. I'm going to make one more announcement. We are going to be passing around note cards that you guys can write questions on for Steve. He's going to have 3 Q&As. So we're going to be passing those around while he's talking.
If I right now you're seeing what? My notes page or the
Yeah, we can see like next slide and add notes, and we can see all the
that
slides
is
on the bottom.
it's not supposed to be doing that. Let me end the show. And because I don't really have any notes, I'll let you see the full screen. Let me share again. And we'll see if this works better this time. Entire screen, share the PowerPoint window. And then put the PowerPoint window into presenter mode.
There we go.
Continue to share.
There it is. That's how we had it. Oh,
now, is it good?
There we go. It's good now.
Super. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so Moses splits the Red Sea, leads the Jewish people into the Holy Land. That's the kind of thing I learned about, and we studied the Bible, but not from some, book in English. No, we studied the Torah in the Hebrew from the scrolls and from books that mimic what's in the scrolls. And we learned Jewish ethics, and we Jews don't have a monopoly on the golden rule, but we had a form of it. There's a story that's told of the great Rabbi Hillel, who lived around the time of Jesus, and he was asked by some impertinent dude, "Can you explain all of Judaism to me while standing on one foot?" And Rabbi Hillel said, "Yeah, sure. What is hateful to you, don't do to somebody else, and all the rest is commentary." And that's I think a beautiful expression of Jewish thinking, and it's reinforced by the lesson of the Holocaust, which we Jews have been mistreated throughout history, but in the Holocaust really took the cake, and um, it is deeply ingrained in the Jewish thinking. And I can give you the example of my family. My mother's parents came from Poland, and they got out in time. But a lot of my mother's relatives were all slaughtered there. When my mom would hear a loud sound, it would give her PTSD. She would think about how the doors of the train cars must have been closing on her family members. They took them to the death camps in Treblinka. This is the Treblinka death camp that I'm showing you on the right. I got to visit Poland, got to do the death camp tourism there. It's really quite there. Auschwitz, maybe some of y'all have been, it's sort of like Disneyland. It's like made for like tour buses and stuff. Treblinka was quiet and, it's really deadly there. All right. So with this background of Jewish thinking of the Golden Rule and of the Holocaust, what you find is Jews, standing arm in arm with the oppressed people, So here's Rabbi Abraham Heschel walking arm in arm with those, with Martin Luther King in the March out of Selma. Jews marching for civil rights, Jews marching for Black Lives Matter. I think you'll find in typical communities, the rabbi of the local temple will be there fighting on the front lines to end the mistreatment of gay people. It's really, I think, when it comes to civil rights, Jews tend to be a very progressive group. And for Heschel to do that, at a time when there was outright violence against people in the South, vehemently supported did I say religious segregation? I'm sorry, not religious segregation, racial segregation. Religious segregation, something else. Yeah, the South vigorously and vehemently supported segregation based on race, not on religion. And Heschel was there standing with those people, against that. So you'll see Jewish leaders with their Black Lives Matter signs standing for gay rights, trans. You even see, large Jewish organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace standing against the mistreatment of Palestinian families. Now, I got to tell you about my background in particular, not just the general Jewish perception of things. I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish community. That means it was a really small community. It was in Washington, D.C., but for all I knew, Washington, D.C. only had one or two restaurants, the one or two kosher ones. That's the only ones we could go to. And my grandfather helped found the synagogue Beth Shalom that we attended. Here it is on the corner of 13th and Eastern Avenue. If you get the chance to visit now, you will find that it is currently the Evangelical Ethiopian Church, because the Jewish people largely moved out to the suburbs and they didn't need this big old building anymore. This is a Hebrew school that I attended growing up. So my class size was 20 Jewish kids. And that was it, right? And if I were to go to a birthday party, it was one of those Jewish kids. I grew up in a really small town within the greater context of Washington, D.C. My grandfather helped found this Hebrew school. And my father had been president of the congregation and of the congregation and of the Hebrew school. And, he had a lot of tuxedos for all the fundraising events he had to go to for that. I got to inherit those now that he's grown out of them. So we learned Jewish values. We learned to love Israel. I collected dimes as a kid to plant trees in Israel. I was very proud of it. And in our school, we didn't talk about Arabs much, but we learned that they hated Jews. We learned stuff like what Golda Meir said about them, that, we wouldn't have a problem if it weren't that Palestinian mothers didn't love their children as much as they hated us Jews, which at the time I believed, but now I find that to be a pretty racist notion, that mothers don't love their children more than anything. I mean, if somebody said to me, we wouldn't have a problem if blacks love their children as much as they love fried chicken and watermelon, we would go, oh my God, that's a really racist thing to think, that the mothers don't love their children. The idea that people would talk about this, Palestinian mothers don't love their children as much as they hate Jews, is really indicative of our thinking, the narrowness of it in some ways. I didn't know anything about Jesus growing up in this environment. The Washington Post didn't publish articles about Jesus very often. Wasn't in the newspapers like it is here in the North Carolina all the time. I didn't hear about Jesus in Hebrew school or at the synagogue. There was one thing I knew about Christians. Y'all know what the one thing was that I knew about Christian, and that was that they killed Jews. That was all I knew, right? Growing up in this little Jewish micro environment. And Muslims pretty much were not on my radar at all. Now, I went on to marry a Jewish woman, and not because she was Jewish, but because she is amazing. And her mom grew up in Israel. Her dad's brother made Aliyah, moved to Israel, raised his family there. So most of my wife's family is in Israel. We've been married 42 years already, and she's by far the better half. We have two really intelligent Jewish boys. One's a sports writer. The other's a graduate student in statistics. And both of them give my wife and I endless nachas. Show of hands. Does anybody know what nachas is? It's a sense of pride. Very good Jewish word to have. Now, I went to medical school, and I became a Jewish doctor. Now, you would think my mom would have been happy with me becoming a Jewish doctor. I was talking to her on the phone. I was an MD PhD student at Duke, doing biochemistry work in the lab. I'm talking to my mom and dad on the phone, and they say, so have you decided what you're going to be? And I tell them, I'm going to be a dermatologist. And then there was dead silence on the other end of the line. Later, I talked to them like a few weeks later, and they said, so have you decided what you're going to go into? And I'm like, yeah, I told you last time, dermatology. And mom's crying, oy vey, what about cardiology? But, after taking a few skin tags off their necks and stuff, they were pretty happy with it. Within the world of dermatology, I become a psoriasis specialist, which is a fabulous place to be within the world of dermatology. At times, I've been rated the #1 expert in the world on psoriasis. Here's pictures of psoriasis, this scaly red rash. Sometimes it's just on the elbows and knees. Sometimes it's all over. It's a horrible thing to have. But being a psoriasis specialist has been great because I don't know if you watch any television, there's all of these new fancy drugs for psoriasis. Yes, they may cost tens of thousands of dollars a year, but they're like miracle cures in terms of their efficacy and safety. When I started treating psoriasis patients, we would put tar on people, wrap them with saran wrap, give them ultraviolet light treatments. We give them poisons to poison their immune system to calm down the inflammation. Now we got drugs that are targeted to the cause of the psoriasis that are basically safe and effective, but they're extremely costly. And because they're so costly, I've gotten to work with patient support groups, with other doctors, educating them about these treatments, with drug companies and insurers. And I can tell you, all of them have been really devoted to helping patients get great care. And, I've gotten to travel around the world, giving talks on psoriasis and stuff. Got to go to Poland, see where my family was from. The Iranians invited me to come to Iran. You know what I said when they invited me there? I'm like, yes, man, the food there was great. The nicest people on the planet, I thought, until later when I met Palestinian people. Been to Saudi Arabia. My first big talk in Saudi Arabia was big conference room, a lot like the room you're in now, only bigger. And I get up in the front, but they've put all the men dermatologists on one side of the room and all the women dermatologists on the other side. And you know how that separation made me feel. Right at home, because I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish synagogue. And at my bar mitzvah, they put all the men over here and all the women over there. Islam is shockingly a lot like religious Judaism. Okay, so in this world of meeting with patients and doctors and insurers, I learned a few principles about, because these people in these different groups would get strange ideas about the people in the other group. And the first principle was, there are things you can't see. So when somebody in your group tells you something about people in another group about which they do not have any direct observations, do not trust what they tell you. You have to make direct observations. An example of this is I was talking to really the top psoriasis specialist in the world, brilliant dermatologist who wrote the book on dermatologic treatment. And we're talking about topical steroid use. And topical steroids, when you give them to people with psoriasis or eczema, they work at first, but gradually they stop working. And we call this tachyphylaxis. And I said to him, it's too bad we can't study it because you can't define it. And he's like, oh, it's really easy to define. It's the more you use the steroid, the less it works. Okay. The more you use the steroid, the less it works. Well, I'm walking down the hall one day with one of my research partners, and he tells me there's a company in California that sells these funny looking medicine bottle caps. And these funny looking medicine bottle caps contain chips that will record the day and time people open and close the bottles. I'm like, they make what? We have to find out what my psoriasis patients are doing. And so we were doing a study. We put some cream in the bottles and we told people, put this on twice a day. We're going to monitor your use of it. So fill out this daily diary and bring the bottles back for us to weigh. So we told them we were monitoring them. We just didn't mention the computer chips. So here's a diary from some anal retentive person who fills out their diary to the nearest 5 minutes. And according to the computer chips, they're taking the medicine pretty much twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. Here's another diary from the study. Now, this diary is kind of interesting because they fill it out just to the nearest hour. And it's odd because it looks like they managed to use the same pen every day for an entire month, almost like they just filled it out all at once at the end of the, on their way into the office to turn in their diary. According to the computer chips, they almost never open the bottles. The computer chips showed that over time, people's use of the medicine just continuously goes down. Tachyphylaxis is not the more you use the medicine, the less it works. It actually makes more sense. It's the less you use the medicine, the less it works. But the most brilliant dermatologist, talking about the most basic thing in all of dermatology, giving people topical steroids, didn't just get it wrong. He got it completely backwards because he was making assumptions about the people in another group about which he did not have direct observations. You got to make direct observations. And another example of this is when we're told terrorists hate us because of our freedom. I'm like, does that make sense? Would they hate us for our freedom? Turns out, after the first Gulf War, we imposed sanctions on Iraq that, according to the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine, killed 500,000 people, children. The sanctions killed 500,000 children through early childhood death. And the numbers may not have been quite right. Later estimates, it was more like 50,000. Who knows? It was reported that it was 500,000. So Clinton's Secretary of State is asked about this on 60 Minutes. I don't know how many of y'all have seen this clip on 60 Minutes. Anybody? Yeah. So she's asked about it. Leslie Stahl asked Madeleine Albright, we've heard that 500,000 children have died. That's more children than killed in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it? And Albright says something along the lines of, we think this is a hard choice, but we think the price is worth it. And if you doubt that, here's the YouTube clip. You can watch it for yourself. Terrorists don't hate us for our freedom. They hate us supporting dictators in their countries. They hate us putting our troops in their countries. They hate us, killing their children. I mean, they hate us doing. They don't like us supporting Israel to slaughter entire Palestinian families. You can find out, what they think just by, you're probably not going to get a chance to talk to them directly very often because they tell us you can't talk to the terrorists. You got to talk to the terrorists if you want to know what they said. But ISIS, for example, had a magazine that you can look up. ISIS, they're uncivilized. They took a Jordanian pilot. They captured him. They put him in a cage. They burned him to death while videoing it, and then they put the video online for people to see. And the people in the West were like, oh my God, these people are uncivilized. And if you go to Dabiq magazine, the ISIS magazine, they say, oh, you think we're uncivilized for burning this one Jordanian pilot? Do you know how many of our brothers and sisters you have burned with the bombs you've dropped on us? Yeah, I don't think they hate us for our freedom. All right. You've got to make direct observations about the people in the other group. Do not rely on what your people in your group tell you about people in the other group. It can be very misleading. Okay. The second principle I want to share is that you should not trust your direct observations. Okay. Because direct observations can be misleading too. And the example of this that I use when I'm talking to dermatologists is ultraviolet light treatments for psoriasis, because everything for me comes back to psoriasis. We've got all these great expensive drugs, but if you go to a tanning bed or just get in an ultraviolet light box in the doctor's office, you can clear psoriasis much less expensively. It's not a permanent cure, but you can get it under control and get regular light treatments. Now, many dermatologists do not believe that tanning beds work. Ultraviolet light treatments in the office work, but the tanning bed light's not exactly the same as in the office, and they think it doesn't work. Now, we're going to do a little mental experiment here. If it's a good dermatologist who has a light box in their office and they put 10 people in their light box and the light box is 80% effective, how many of the patients are going to clear up? Now, you're probably, because you're bright people in Los Alamos, you're probably thinking 8. And you're exactly right. 8 would clear up. Now, this dermatologist doesn't send people to tanning beds, but people try the tanning beds and he sees some of them. If this dermatologist sees 10 people who tried a tanning bed, and if the tanning bed in his community is 80% effective, how many would be clear? And the answer is none of them. Why? Because 50 people will go to the tanning bed, 40 will clear, 10 won't clear. He's going to see the 10 that didn't clear. He's not sending people to the tanning bed. He's just seeing what comes to him. And the only ones who are going to come to him are the ones who don't get better. So when you're looking at absolute accurate observations, they can still be horribly misleading if there's a systematic selection bias going on. Like, I'm a dermatologist. I've seen thousands of patients referred by the family doctors. Then they send me people with the wrong diagnosis, the wrong treatments that made things worse. I can count on one hand the number of times I saw a patient they managed to cure. Why? It's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's because every time they make the right diagnosis, prescribe the right therapy, and the patient gets well, they don't send me the patient. I just don't get to ever see any of their successes. This is a really common phenomenon that affects people's perceptions about the world. Now, I'm Jewish and I read the cover of the newspapers. What is the one thing I know about Catholic priests from reading the newspaper, the cover of the newspaper? Yeah, I won't go into detail. Anyway, you could see how if you're an American and you're reading the cover of the newspaper and you see the word Muslim on the cover of the paper, the next word's going to be terrorist, and you get a really warped perception of what people in the other groups are like. So you've got not only to make direct observations, you have to make certain your observations are representative. That's kind of like why I don't rely on learning about Iran from my Iranian research fellow, because yes, he's from Iran. He has hand experience there. But without even asking him, I can tell you he doesn't like the Iranian government because he left his language, his friends, his family to come halfway across the world to do research with me. He must hate his government, you know. But getting to go to Iran, you get to see what things are maybe really like if you get the chance. Okay. So those are two basic principles. The third principle I want to share is really the most interesting one of them all. And that is when two people from different groups are looking at exactly the same thing, they can see totally different things, because what we see in our minds, what we perceive, is determined not just by what comes in, but by how the brain interprets it. I'll give you another example from psoriasis. These new drugs for psoriasis, most of them, the fabulous ones, are given by injection. A lot of people don't want to take an injection. Now I have to help them get over the idea of an injection. I do it by anchoring them. You know, I'll tell them, I got a great drug for you, but you have to take a shot once a day. And did I just say once a day? Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's not once a day. It's only every month. If I don't say once a day first, their brain is comparing taking a shot to not taking a shot. They don't want to do it. If I say once a day first, then when I tell them once a month, their brain is comparing once a month to once a day. And it's a totally different story. And I actually tested this. I had my minions go into the waiting room, find 100 psoriasis patients. They asked 50 of them, how willing would you be to take a shot once a month for your psoriasis? And the average willingness was like 2 out of 10. They asked the other 50, how willing would you be to take a shot once a day for your psoriasis? And then they asked them the once a month question, and their willingness was 7.5 out of 10. You know, this explains why sales prices make you buy stuff. It also explains the phenomenon of why veins are blue. If I ask medical students why are veins blue, they will tell me it's the deoxygenated hemoglobin. And then I point out I give blood at the Red Cross every 2 months, and every time they stick a needle in my arm, red stuff comes out, not blue stuff. So you may be wondering, well, why is the vein blue? Well, I asked the computer, what is the color of the vein? I should probably get the Nobel Prize in Medicine for what I'm about to show you. The computer says it's this pink color. This line printed on a neutral gray background is pink, not blue. Then I asked the computer, well, what's the color of the surrounding skin? Change this background to the color of the surrounding skin. Now, I am not going to change the color of the line, but you see the line now looks blue. It's still the same pink line, but because your brain is seeing it in this pink context, your brain sees blue. I don't talk about this in North Carolina much, but if you believe in evolution, you could imagine it was probably helpful for it to be able to distinguish a brown lion from brown grass on the African savannas. Now, you know your vein is not blue, okay? It can't be blue. You know it can't possibly be blue because the red stuff's in your veins. You know it's all an optical illusion. But if you look at your vein now, it's still going to look blue because you cannot control it. You know, when Americans see an American or an Israeli child killed, we call that terrorism. And when we see a Palestinian child killed, we call it, I don't know, collateral damage or something like that. Or, or we're helping them because we're getting rid of Hamas. We're helping those children. you know, but if you were on the other side and you saw, a Palestinian child being killed, you go, the Americans are supporting terrorism. And, when you see the Israeli child killed, well, in Islam, they teach even one death is horrible. But the person who committed the killing would say, oh, I'm retaliating. I'm just trying to get them to stop being violent and to get them to stop killing my brothers and sisters. Okay. So those are the principles. And I'm the dermatologist in this small town, Mount Airy, North Carolina, as part of my academic job. This is the town Andy Griffith grew up in. I'm the dermatologist in Mayberry at the time. And I'm listening to books on tape as I'm driving up there, and I'm learning about Islam for the first time. And it's like they're describing Judaism. It's like one God, we restrict what you can eat, give charity, be peaceful. It sounded like just like Judaism to me. So dermatology took me to Stockholm, Sweden, to attend an international patient psoriasis meeting. And there was an Egyptian dermatologist there. And I'm like, I'm pretty shy. I have trouble going up and talking to people, but I go up to him and I say, hey, would you like to have lunch together? And he saw the Jewish doctor from America. He's like, yeah, he wanted to have lunch with me. So I wanted to learn firsthand what his understanding was of Israel, Palestine, and, dermatology issues, but mostly, Islam, things like that, learn from him firsthand. And so we go and we take our box lunches out. We're having this great conversation. And, that in Hebrew school, they taught me that Arabs wanted to kill Jews, which, that's people in my group telling me wrong stuff about people in another group. And his understanding of the Jewish people and Israelis were just as warped as what I was taught about his people. He was, saying, yeah, those Jews, they want to take over the entire Middle East. That is their goal. I'm like, I don't know. I think they just want their children to be safe. But his impression was kind of warped. At the end of our lunch, I noticed that, I got up, took my trash and threw it away. He left his trashy, box lunch, what was left of this trash, on the park bench. And my first thought was, oh my God, Cairo must be one hideously, messed up place and dirty and stuff. And then I thought for a moment, Islam teaches giving charity and stuff. I better ask him about this. And so I said to him, I noticed you left your lunch on the park bench. Can you tell me about that? And he said, oh, yes, Steve, the sandwich was a ham sandwich and I could not eat it. And I wasn't that hungry. And there was an apple left that I didn't eat. And this was good food and it shouldn't go to waste. So I left it for some person who is in need to come and pick it up. And I have just tremendous respect for people whose religion teaches them to, see the world that way, to always be thinking about, how they can, be good to other folks and stuff. Okay. So that's the end of part one of my presentation. How are we doing on time? Oh, the perfect timing. We've used up 1/3 of our 2 hours. And so I thought we could open up for questions. So you could just ask questions about my background, ask questions about what I perceive as, what is the Jewish perspective on, not necessarily specifically Israel, Palestine, but on, how Jews generally see the world, how we're committed to progressive, treatment, how we stand with what we perceive as oppressed people.
Like that. I also have these right questions.
Oh, did we get some written questions in?
Haven't yet, but
I've got a question. I've got a question. All right. Yeah. So as a Jewish American, how has your identity shaped both your perspective of your work?
My Jewish identity shaped my perspective of my work in dermatology.
And your research, like with the Promised Land Museum.
Ah, yeah. So we'll come to the Promised Land Museum stuff. Yeah. I grew up Orthodox Jewish and we didn't work on Saturdays. I had an uncle who was really religious, and we visited him. And it was Saturday, and his phone rang at home, and he picked it up and answered. And I'm like, "You can't do that on the Sabbath." And he's like, "Oh, well, it could be my patience, and that's a higher mitzvah in my mitzvahs, a good deed." And so, you know, I work just fine on Jewish holidays on the Sabbath, but as long as I'm, helping people, I think that's the highest calling. And so that's what's important to me. The Jewish Promised Land Museum, yeah, I mean, Judaism and my Holocaust understanding background has made me absolutely committed, like other Jews, the Jew people in your community, I'm sure the local rabbi, to absolutely stand against the mistreatment of oppressed people. Some Jews haven't figured out that Palestinians are oppressed people yet. When they will, they will. So I'm very optimistic about the future. But so when I learned things about Israel that they did not teach me about in Hebrew school, I was like, oh, I need to share this with the world. So, I put together a book with those 3 principles. It's called Compartments. It's not, you might find a used copy somewhere. Didn't spread the word as I had hoped. I created this online museum to share the information that I will share with you in part 2 of this presentation.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any questions about his background or anything else? No. I think we can move on to part 2.
All right, excellent. I have to hit the share button again, don't I? You're not seeing the slides, are you?
Nope.
No. Okay, where did my share button go? Yes, here we are. Share the window. Excuse me.
And we can see your notes again.
Well, we'll stop the share and restart the share. How about now?
Use slideshow on the
Are you
upper
getting
left.
slideshow? What's that?
If you click maybe use slideshow or up at the top in the left, yeah. Try the use slideshow button.
What are you seeing now?
I can see your notes and all
Oh,
the other slides.
okay.
Not that one, the one next to it. Yep, try that one. Oh, now the slides are gone.
Application window. Oh, I think I know what I was doing wrong. I apologize.
There
Okay,
we go. And hit
we've got it
slideshow.
now, right?
Hit slideshow in the upper next to animations. Perfect. I think you're good.
This meeting is being recorded, it says. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, now, no, this is still not good. It's good for you, right?
It's good on our end.
All right, well, that will have to do. Gosh, it really changed some things for me. Okay. So, all right. So now you understand my background. Now, I'm visiting my wife's family in Israel, and I am poised for an evolution here, because we come over a mountain, and I see a scene like this one, and we're on the hillside. We're overlooking farms and factories. On the hillside are trees that may have been the ones I had planted when I was a kid. And it just occurred to me at that time, my my wife's family showed us the whole country basically. Her uncle on mom's side was minister of public works for the city of Jerusalem and took us on all these tours of special places in Jerusalem. Her uncle on her dad's side was like in charge of water for the country. So he took us on every place water was important, which was everywhere. So we'd seen like the whole country. And it just occurred to me, I'd never seen any place where Palestinians had been living. They never, I mean, and I had learned that, hundreds of thousands of people had become refugees. Where had they been living? And like a scientist, it suddenly occurred to me, I had been taught this had been a land of all swamps and deserts, and we made it bloom with these factories and farms and stuff and planted these forests. If this had all been swamps and deserts like they had taught me, where had Palestinians been living? Something seemed amiss. Kind of like, when Einstein and folks saw that, the speed of light in Maxwell's equations was a constant, for everybody. It's like something's not right here. We got to figure this out. And so, oh, shoot. Okay. So I started to look into this for myself. Now I'm Jewish. I had a Jewish background. I didn't trust Arabs at that point. So I'm only looking at Jewish sources. So that's why I consider the Promised Land Museum the Jewish Museum of the Palestinian Experience. It's from a Jewish perspective. It's Jewish sources, information almost exclusively. And I found a lot of information, and it changed my understanding of everything about Israel, because again, the vein looks blue. So now my context has changed. So Israel looks different to me than it did before I learned these things. The museum, this online museum, comes from a Jewish moral perspective. It's one informed by the Holocaust, that we must stand against all injustice, from the golden rule that you treat people the way you would want to be treated. And it's Jewish historians, Jewish writers, Jewish documents, a report from the Israeli Defense Force. I mean, and then later on, I went to the West Bank and I had first-hand experiences, which led me to write the Bent Towards Justice book. And there's a scene in the book which is a lot like where there's this doctor. It turns out he's a dermatologist. Okay, there's the book is sort of fiction, but there's, I'm a nerdy, chemist, scientist type. I don't know. I'm not creative. So there's not a lot of creativity in here. It's, based on real experiences for the most part. And the dermatologist in the book gets to speak in a venue a lot like this one, only it's this dermatologist, doctor, and the rabbi from the town. And they both get to speak. And maybe I could read you a little bit about this section of the book. So the main character in the book is a Holocaust survivor who's very pro-Israel. Then he learns some things. Then he goes to Palestine, to West Bank, and has the experiences that I had walking the West Bank. And he comes to view things very differently, and he leads towards a really beautiful ending where things are good for everybody. But in the midst of the book, in the middle of the book, the local rabbi of the story still is a total supporter of Israel. And there's this doctor in town who's speaking out for equal treatment of Palestinian families. And the rabbi doesn't like this. And they end up having a debate in a venue like the one you're in now. And the rabbi gets to talk first. He's saying how glad people's here. And then he starts out, we Jews have had a continuous presence in the Holy Land for over 2,000 years. True. After suffering in the Holocaust, he paused, looking at the back of the room where the Holocaust survivor is sitting. We returned to Israel, seeking only peace, to live alongside non-Jewish inhabitants as equals. Arabs, jealous of us, tried to throw the Jews into the sea, yet with the help of God, we prevailed against all odds and created a Jewish state, a democracy, a place where all people, Jewish and non-Jewish, men, women, and people of all races would be treated equally. The young people in the audience applauded. The rabbi gave them a smile, but mentioned for them to quiet down. In short, a country consistent with our Jewish and our American values. Whenever there's a natural disaster anywhere in the world, Israel volunteers to help. Yet Israel is surrounded by Arabs bent on Israel's destruction. We must not yield in our support of Israel. Rabbi Matt then starts this video, and there's this kind of travelogue-like footage. The vivid green landscape of farmland reclaimed from barren desert, pine groves, rows of orange trees, wetlands with flocks of large birds of every color, and sunshine, always sunshine. Then there's time-lapse video of wasteland turned into modern settlements with children playing in the Judean sun. The camera soars above the countryside, then pans across modern highways named for Israeli prime ministers Begin and Shamir, the hilltops drenched in the Judean sun. And then the film shifts its focus towards Tel Aviv, where a time-lapse video highlighted the vibrant movement of cars and people through the day, streaks of red and white lights at night. There were clips of bikini-clad Israeli women on the beach, of Israeli hospitals and high technology centers. Finally, the film showed people in Jerusalem, people of many faiths, celebrating together. Jerusalem looked modern with its growing suburbs reached by hypermodern rapid transit tram systems. Its bars, pizza parlors, and youthful nightlight paralleled ancient alleyways in which Jewish, Christian, and Muslim merchants sold all manner of Holy Land souvenirs in the market of the old city. Jerusalem, with the temple's western walls, with throngs of people praying in ancient and modern ways, leaving their notes to God in its cracks. Suddenly, the auditorium reverberated with the sound of an explosion. The audience was visibly startled. Stripped suddenly by fear, one of the girl named Katie in the audience grabs the boy she's with, Jeremy, by the wrist, then blushed and let go. Katie looked at the doctor, who seemed to shake his head. Sirens blared over the auditorium sound system, and the video shifted to a scene of people running to a shelter. Children wept in their mother's arms. This was Sderot, the site of a Palestinian rocket attack. Most of the audience likely didn't recognize the location, but they could see the pure horror being inflicted. They could sense the terror those Israeli children felt. The video ended with the pictures of Israeli military forces restoring order, the friendly faces of the young Israeli soldiers, boys and girls in their late teens, carrying rifles, speaking of their commitment to defend their country. All right. That was the rabbi's presentation. Then the doctor gets up. It's his turn. And, he's not used to speaking to people, which I'm doing all right tonight. I feel okay. But Friedman puts up this picture of this guy here on the screen behind Friedman. I'm Feldman. The doctor in the story is Friedman. Okay. On the screen behind Friedman was a picture of a man, Northern European appearance, with short hair combed tightly back, piercing eyes, a narrow nose and chin, and precise bearing. He had all the hallmarks of a Hitler follower. Friedman fumbled with his notes. Does anyone know who this is? The crowd remained still, silent. It was as though the audience was waiting to see where Dr. Friedman was going. All eyes focused on the stage. The anticipation was palpable. This is Count Folke Bernadotte, a Swedish diplomat and nobleman. He saved Jews from the Holocaust. He saved tens of thousands of prisoners from German concentration camps. Have you not heard of him? Friedman asked, and then paused for effect. Have you all heard of him? Anybody? Show of hands. No? Okay. Bernadotte, Dr. Friedman continued, was the United Nations mediator trying to bring peace to Palestine in the late 40s. He was assassinated on Friday, September 17th, 1948, by the Stern Gang, a Jewish terrorist group led by future Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir. Gasps and murmurs peppered the auditorium. Katie could tell that most people around her were uncomfortable with the term Jewish terrorist group. Dr. Friedman looked directly at the Temple Youth Group. Did you know there were Jewish terrorist groups? He asked rhetorically. Besides Katie, Jeremy leaned forward, his hands balled into fists. But those were fringe groups, Dr. Friedman added with a trace of irony so slight it was almost impossible to recognize at first. We Jews never robbed, looted, or raped when Israel was founded in 1948. Of course not. We were moral, Friedman exclaimed, pausing, and then he spoke as if he was interrupting himself. Well, there was one town, Deir Yassin, where our forces committed atrocities, killed civilians, men, women, and children. Have you heard of this place, Deir Yassin? And he looked around the room, and Katie let her eyes wander the crowd too. She searched out the old Holocaust survivor in the back, now standing at the back of the room, leaning on his cane. His face had gone gaunt and long, his mouth slightly open. In amazement or horror, she couldn't tell. But this abomination was an aberration. This is not what we are like, Friedman spoke in an authoritarian voice. But he paused again before continuing. Well, there was another town, Saf, where the Jewish army massacred about 60 men and raped a few women, at least according to the Jewish Israelis who reported. We're good people, you know. When we do something wrong, we report it. Many in the crowd began shifting in their seats. But again, This terrible event was not indicative of who we are. Jeremy muttered something under his breath, then louder. Don't be so sure what he's saying is the truth. He looked at Katie as if he was going to say more, but then he turned and looked forward again. I am no orator as Rabbi Rabinowitz is. I have no glitzy, polished video to show you, but Israeli Jewish historians have studied how in 1948, a Jewish country was created in a land where most of the people were not Jewish, Dr. Friedman said. Suddenly he was interrupted by a member of the evangelical group that was there. There were no Palestinians, she yelled. People turned to see who shouted, and for a moment the crowd seemed unsure what to do, as if their attention and allegiances were torn. Friedman didn't seem rattled. He seemed prepared for this, as if he had heard it before, said many times. He peered into the dark corners of the auditorium where the voice had come from. That's right, he said. Thank you for pointing that out. There were people, though, good people, Jewish and non-Jewish families living together peacefully in towns and villages in the land that was then called. And then Friedman flashed a picture of an old map of Palestine up on the screen as he emphasized the word Palestine. You can go to, this map is one I found in the Library of Congress. You can find many old maps there. This one, large text at the bottom of the map revealed it was made in 1750, had come from the Library of Congress website. Friedman continued, Israeli Jewish historians have documented, in addition to the rapes and massacres we committed, that the Jewish army expelled the entire population of over 400 towns, the men, the women, and the children. By the way, besides there being no Palestinians, people nowadays talk about Israel as being a settler colonial enterprise. And the local rabbi I talked to said, well, it's not colonization. We weren't colonizing. Well, it turned out the people who were doing the colonizing called it what they were doing colonization. But that's just an aside, not in the book. The 400 towns are listed in this book written by Dr. Fayez. He was also a doctor at Wake Forest at one time. He wrote this book, The Colonization of Palestine. You can get this book probably used somewhere, and it describes the 400 towns in the book. Okay, going back to the story. Behind Friedman, the screen rolled through the list of those towns. Then the screen displayed a book whose cover title was in Hebrew. It was this book here. Friedman held a copy of the book in his hand. This, he said, is the history of the Haganah, the history of the Jewish army that created the state of Israel. And here is where the book describes the war plans of the Haganah, where it explicitly says to destroy Palestinian villages, burn them, blow them up, and plant mines in the debris. You know, in my Hebrew school, they taught us we begged Palestinian families to stay, but they fled to make it easier to kill Jews, which now that I think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense that families would pay. Well, what would it take you to pick up your family, and leave your house and home, and take off with what belongings you could carry to further the killing of Jews? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Dr. Friedman looked at the section where the young people were sitting. Did the Honorable Rabbi Matt ever mention any of this to you? Or did he tell you that we Jews begged Palestinians to stay? Destroying their villages doesn't sound like we wanted them to stay. Planting mines in the debris doesn't sound like we wanted them to return. Oh, and those trees we've been planting in Israel for decades. Did the Honorable Rabbi Matt tell you that those forests you and I helped plant cover over the remains of the Palestinian villages we destroyed? Lies, screamed a voice from the back. Lies, echoed several students in the youth group. Lies, Jeremy said. But Dr. Friedman steeled himself and continued. Here is a report from the Israeli Defense Force on how Palestinian families became refugees. This is not from a Palestinian source. This report is from the Israeli Defense Force, our own Jewish army. We can trust what the IDF says, right? Friedman held up a small pile of papers, and behind him, the text of those pages began to scroll on the screen. The IDF made this report in July of 1948, when Palestinian families became refugees. The report explains why Palestinian families became refugees in order of importance. 1, direct hostile Jewish operations against Arab settlements. 2, the effect of our hostile operations on nearby Arab settlements. 3, operations of Jewish terrorist organizations. As Friedman read the reasons Palestinians fled, there was grumbling in the audience. Many groups in the room, the churchgoers, the husbands and wives, the teenagers, were all looking at the research material and then back at each other. Lies, came the cry again. That's not what happened. Palestinians hid and wait for the Jews. They want to throw the Jews into the sea yesterday, today, tomorrow. A middle-aged man in front yelled, "You traitor! You defame Israel. You're worse than Hitler." Dr. Friedman always presented hard data to back up his points. Katie turned to Jeremy and whispered, "I told you he sees things differently." He felt a spark of concern for Dr. Friedman. The audience was disintegrating into chaos. Maybe he shouldn't keep going. Taking questions from the audience was going to be like rebuilding sandcastles against ocean waves. The pastor who was leading the event stood up, but the crowd drowned out his voice. Friedman gauged the room. He likely had only a few minutes left before all control was lost. He flipped to the next slide. It was hard to make out the text, but the newspaper headline was clear. Israel bars Rabin from reporting 48 eviction of Arabs. Friedman locked his gaze on only one set of eyes now, Mr. Schwartzman, our Holocaust survivor, who was standing in the back of the room. Israeli Prime Minister Rabin wrote in detail about how he and his army expelled 50,000 Palestinian men, women, and children from the towns of Lydda and Ramla alone. Still looking at Schwartzman, he pointed at the young man sitting quietly, peacefully in the front row. This man's father was one of those refugees. He and his family lived through those expulsions. But the story of these expulsions didn't make it into Rabin's book. The Israelis censored him from publishing it. Did they not want you to know about it? Friedman asked, his eyes still fixed on Schwartzman, the Holocaust survivor. Jeremy noticed, "Katie, that's Mr. Schwartzman. He's a Holocaust survivor. Goes to our temple." Schwartzman was staring back directly at Friedman, never blinking behind his eyes, and his eyes were beginning to water. Behind Friedman, the screen now showed ragged refugees on the road, on a dusty road, carrying what possessions they could, followed by pictures of a tent city of refugees. The caption said these were Palestinian families on the road out of Lydda. "Those who can make it out of the country did," he said, "fleeing to Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon. Many fled to other locations, with most Arabs going to places like Gaza and Jaffa. And yes, Bethlehem. There they stayed with no way to leave." Finally, Friedman displayed a picture of a building reduced to rubble amid a modest Gaza neighborhood. Standing in the middle of the debris, a Palestinian man holding a lifeless child in his arms turned towards the blue sky, his face contorted in pain. The audience cries of lies grew louder, but Dr. Friedman persisted. "I gave Rabbi Matt a copy of this article and all the other sources. You can ask to see them up close from him or me. Israel still rains down death and destruction on those same families, all with our support," Friedman concluded, showing a final image that superimposed a picture of the temple's "We Stand with Israel" sign into the corner of the picture of the Palestinian man and his dead child. One of the Jewish people, Sam Weisblatt, stood. "This is ridiculous," he said in a firm voice. "None of that ever happened. I don't believe a word of it. This is a bunch of anti-Semitic fabrications. You just want to destroy Israel. This is all just made up by a self-hating Jew." The crowd murmured their agreement. "That's right. It doesn't matter what he stands up there and says. God gave Israel to the Jews. We support Israel," a person with the evangelical group said. Jeremy, still sitting with Katie, stood up. "Rabbi, tell him none of this is true." Rabbi Matt stood up confidently, apparently unmoved by anything Friedman had said. The debate format had clearly been abandoned, but the audience quieted for the rabbi. Looking at the temple youth, Rabbi Matt began, "Look, it's complicated. It was war. Yes, some bad things were done, but it was war. It happened 70 years ago. The only thing that matters now is working for peace. Peace for everyone, Jews and non-Jews. We can't change the past. We have to have peace. We have to have security. And we have to defend Israel from Palestinian terrorists." Yeah. Some of those terrorists were like Menachem Begin. You know, they named robes after him, and Yitzhak Shamir, subsequent prime ministers of Israel. Okay, I think that's like the key scene in the book, and basically, I think it's, you know, it mimics what we're trying to do here pretty well. The protagonist of the book is this guy, Murray Schwartzman. Now, Murray is this elderly Jewish Holocaust survivor. He's absolutely dedicated justice. He's devoted to Israel, but then he hears these things. And by the way, the audio version of the book is read by Ed Asner, who was very supportive of the idea of this. And he is who I picture when I picture this Holocaust survivor, Murray. And so Murray begins to question what he knows about Israel. And so he goes to Israel and Palestine to see for himself in the book, what things are like. And there's very little fiction in this part of the story. He ends up walking the streets of Ramallah. He eats meals in the home of Palestinian families. He goes to PLO headquarters and meets their leaders, which I got to do when I was there. He goes to a mosque where the imam had been like a Hamas delegate to the Palestinian Congress, which I got to do. He sees what Palestinian children are like. But by the way, this is this letter, the Einstein letter with his Einstein signature on the letter. I've got Einstein's signature in my hand. I'm so proud of this. He was asked to support one of those Israeli terrorist groups. And he says, when a real and final catastrophe should befall us in Palestine, the first responsible for it would be the British, and the second responsible for it, the terrorist organizations built up from our own ranks. I am not willing to see anybody associated with those misled and criminal people. Yeah, there's a Jewish National Fund. I probably, made donation to that, when I was a kid. And, this is so the Jews can buy, mortgage, or lease land in, Jewish National Fund land. And it all seemed very reasonable to me when I was a kid. It turns out here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Reynolds of Reynolds Tobacco, makers of Winston and Salem cigarettes, left his big Tanglewood estate as a public park for the white race. And this seems to me to be totally abhorrent that they would do that. And now I'm thinking, only Jews can buy, mortgage, and lease these lands. That sounds a lot to me like Reynolds leaving his public park to the folks with white race. It made me realize Reynolds was not a bad guy. He just, to him, it was normal that you would do this for the white people. And a lot of Jews think it's perfectly normal that, we should have land set aside that only Jews can buy, mortgage, or lease. This fellow here is Max Carter. He's a Quaker. He's a devout Quaker from Indiana originally. And, that beard grows, and normally he's wearing his Quaker hat. And this is the head of the Quaker meeting there. So this is a Palestinian Quaker woman. And you can't tell her from any of the older women at the synagogue I grew up with. Now, Max was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War, and he served his time as a conscientious objector teaching at the Friends School, the Quaker Friends School in Ramallah, Palestine. He got to know what Palestinians were like. And he says they're like the warmest, friendliest people on the planet. And ever since, I think, 1980, he would go back to Ramallah and he would take Americans with them, doing in small steps, maybe 10 people at a time, trying to change the world, showing them what Palestinians are really like. And he kept asking me, would I go with him? I'm like, I'm Jewish, America, I can't go there. But then when one time he asked me, I looked at my calendar and there was nothing on it for 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, it's like God set it up that I have to go do this, So I'm like, my heart is thumping, but my brain's saying it's okay. I've been to Iran. People were nice there. So Max takes me and these Christian people along with him. And we start off in the Israeli side so that these Christian folks can see the Sea of Galilee and see where Jesus made all those great statements that Jesus made. And we're staying in this Mar Elias school, which was a school designed for kids of all religions to attend in the Arab side of Israel. Then after spending a little time on the Israeli side, meeting people from kibbutz and stuff, so here we go into the West Bank. And as you're crossing in, they tell you, this road leads to Palestinian village. This entrance for Israeli citizens is dangerous. And it's like, Will Robinson, danger, danger, And it is dangerous for people like me because I have high cholesterol. And there were a lot of ice cream and sweet shops and bakeries in Ramallah. Here's Max in his Quaker hat with the long beard and all the Palestinian kids coming up to talk to him. And you can't tell these kids apart from the kids I went to Hebrew school with. You could tell I'm a horrible photographer. That's my finger up there. Oh my God. And the kids are coming up to Max and they're going, Hamas, Hamas, because this is, with the long beard, this is what somebody from Hamas would look like. And they took us into the schools there, and I did not see anything in the school saying, hey, let's go shoot Jewish children. I see yin yang symbols. I saw books in the library in the Friends Meeting House with Mandela and the story of Martin Luther King and Gandhi. I got to go to Palestinian refugee camps. This is the library in one of the refugee camps. The art is on the graffiti on the walls of the refugee camp have flowers and sunshine and stuff. This is the mosque that I went to. This is the imam of the mosque, who spoke through an interpreter, but he had been in the Hamas delegate at one time. And I asked him, about, relationships with Jews. And he's like, we don't want to kill Jews. We don't hate Jews. We hate being made refugees from our homes. The Quakers did not have a lot of money, so we did not eat at restaurants very often. We ate in people's homes. So this is the home of a Muslim Palestinian family. Dad's a teacher. This is the kind of thing they have posted in their home. This is the home of a Christian Palestinian family. And I have never seen so many Jesuses in someone's home as I did in this house. You walk into the house and there was a holographic Jesus whose eyes followed you as you walked in. Over the dining room table, there was the Last Supper. Jesus was in the bathroom. Jesus is bleeding out on the coffee table in the living room. It was everywhere. And it's kind of not surprising that Christian Palestinians would be so close to Jesus because Jesus was a Palestinian, right? And these Christian Palestinians are walking on the same stones that Jesus walked on every day. It's really strange. And honest to God, I used to, New Yorkers are nice enough. North Carolinians, we're nicer. When I went to Iran, the people were even nicer than North Carolinians. When I went to Palestine, nicest people you could possibly. The first day when we arrive in Ramallah, we're walking down the street and this Palestinian recognizes Max, and sees that he's brought Americans with him. And he yells, Max, you're back. You brought a dozen people with you. Come to my house for dinner tonight. Bring everybody. He picks up his cell phone. He's calling his wife to say, hey, I'm bringing home 12 people for dinner tonight. And Max is like, no. We already got plans. But North Carolinians are nice, but they're not going to tell 12 people, call the wife, hey, we're going to feed 12 people tonight. This is an effort that I've made to humanize people. Every time I go to some other country and I get to visit somebody's home, I try to take a picture of their refrigerator. I've got refrigerators from the United States, a couple from, one Palestine, one Israel. I got a Saudi Arabia here. I've got an Iran, and I think I got a second Palestine one in here. And if you could tell them apart, I'd be shocked, right? I mean, what do people have on their refrigerators at home? It doesn't matter what their religion is, what country they put up pictures of their friends and families. It's just what people do. Here are a couple of Palestinian kids. I left with a very positive picture of what Palestinian people are like. The idea that Palestinian mothers don't love their children as much as they hate us Jews is an extraordinarily racist thing to say. When in the book, when Murray goes to that Arab Christian school that was founded by an Arab Israeli Christian Palestinian pastor, Elias Shakur, whose book Blood Brothers should be required reading for anybody interested. Murray reads this thing that Shakur said in a speech once. You who live in the United States, if you are pro-Israel, on behalf of the Palestinian children, I call unto you, give further friendship to Israel. They need your friendship. But stop interpreting that friendship as an automatic antipathy against me, the Palestinian, who is paying the bill for what others have done against my beloved Jewish brothers and sisters in the Holocaust and Auschwitz and elsewhere. And if you have been enlightened enough to take the side of Palestinians, oh, bless your hearts, take our sides, because for once you'll be on the right side, right? But if taking our side would mean to become one-sided against my Jewish brothers and sisters, back up. We do not need such friendship. We need one more common friend. We do not need one more enemy, for God's sake. So Murray doesn't see Jew hatred. He sees that families want to return from the homes from which they were made refugees. And then, as he's traveling around the West Bank like I did, and he thinks he can't possibly, he goes to Hebron and he sees apartheid there. I mean, it's just stark, where the Palestinians are behind barbed wire, and the places have been depopulated, and children going to school have to go through checkpoints. And he's just totally moved by that. He thinks he can't possibly see anything more moving. He goes to meet these two guys here. This is my meeting with these two guys. This is an Israeli father, and this is a Palestinian father. And they're members of the Parents Circle, the one organization that doesn't want any more members, because all of these parents have had children killed in this conflict. And the Jewish father, his daughter was killed in one of those Jerusalem pizza bombings. His Palestinian friend here, and these two guys are like brothers now. They've suffered in the most horrific way together. The Palestinian guy, his daughter, Abir was her name, was shot in the back of the head by an Israeli sniper. In the book, I quote exactly word for word what the Israeli father said. This conflict is not worth the life of one more child. The only way forward is to talk to one another, to understand one another's point of view. We don't want you to be pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. We demand of you to be pro-peace, to be against injustice and against this ongoing situation in which one people is dominating another. It must be changed. It's the essence of evil, and it must be stopped. I am a Jew with the utmost respect for my people, to my tradition, to my history, and my religion. And I will tell you that ruling and oppressing and humiliating and occupying millions and millions of people for so many years without any democratic rights is not Jewish, period. No two ways about it. And being against it is not anti-Semitism. So Murray comes back and decides to do something about it. And in my case, coming back was writing the book. And that is the end of part 2 of our 3-part presentation.
That was super fun. All right, I want to open up questions based on part 2. Do you have any questions about what he read in the book, the characters? Do you have any questions about what it was like visiting the West Bank? Maybe misconceptions you've heard about Jews visiting Palestine? We had a question. How long ago was it that you visited? When did you go to the West Bank?
I think it was 2017. I thought by the year 2000 it would all be over. I was wrong. It just got worse.
Mm-hmm. Carol.
All right, well, on to part 3. We don't have any questions.
No, we had a question. So she asked, how does your wonderful wife feel about your transformation and your journey into this research? And
yeah, okay. So my Israeli relatives do not agree with me. Okay. For them, the vein is still blue. They can't see it from the other side. My wife's totally supportive. I decided one of the things I would do to try to get this message out is I would run for US Congress. So last election cycle, I ran as the Libertarian candidate in our district, and my wife was totally supportive. Uh, she let me spend the time. She helped me. She, we spent a lot of our money on it. I didn't get very far, but she's just totally supportive of it. She is not as in your face with all this information like I am, but she certainly supports peace and justice for all people and sees that this is a huge problem and the Israelis are wrong. And she probably doesn't talk about it with her cousins very much.
I'm going to read one and then we've got another one in the audience. So the next question is, do you regard the Israel of the Old Testament as being the same as the state of Israel today?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because I will hear people say they're not the same thing, you know? But if you're raised in an Orthodox Jewish family, you think they are the same thing. Yeah, we Jews are the Jews and we're the people of Israel. And when we at our Passover, we have the four questions, and the smart one asks the questions one way, the wicked one asks the questions, the other one, the young one who doesn't understand. And one of the things we're taught in this Passover Seder, this meal we have at the Passover, it's around the time of Easter, is that you should tell your son that God took me out of Egypt, as though it was as though it was us that came out of Egypt. So I think of us as being totally connected to that Israel. And some people will say, no, it's not the same, because evangelicals want to support the biblical Israel, and this is not the biblical Israel. I'm totally fine with it being the biblical Israel, because I think the solution is not that you support Israel to kill, slaughter people. I don't think that was what Jesus was talking about. I think Jesus was talking about the golden rule and not mistreating other people. So, and Judaism to me is not, we want to rebuild the temple and sacrifice goats again because we want to go back to being an animal sacrifice cult like we were in the Old Testament. It's about the central portion of the Bible. The very center of the Old Testament says, to treat others the way you would want to be treated, to treat your brother as you would want to be treated yourself. And so I think of it, as my Jewish perspective is that it's all continuous. I can understand the perspective of people who don't think it's all continuous and they want to argue about that. I think it's pointless to argue about that when everybody can agree we shouldn't expel peaceful families from their homes. We shouldn't make them refugees. We shouldn't subject them to violence. We should let them return to their homes and live together peacefully. So all the other stuff to me is just really extraneous nonsense.
Okay, and we've got one more question from the audience.
Real simple. Do you believe in God, and can you say his name?
He asked, do you believe in God? And
yeah, well, I certainly can't say his name. Do I believe in God? No. I'd say that I don't believe in the fairy tale aspects of the religion anymore. But I won't say his name, because part of the fairy tale religion that I was taught is we just don't say the name. We don't even write it down. I even have trouble writing the word God on a sheet of paper. I might do G''D because that is so deeply ingrained in my way of thinking. Great question. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that's
yeah.
question.
It's kind of funny because you'll hear some people say that, the folks like Netanyahu in the government, a lot of them are secular, and they will tell you, these secular Jews who don't believe in God will tell you that God gave this land to the Jewish people, which is kind of, interesting. And it's not that foreign an idea to me, since even though I don't believe in God, I believe, I've internalized these religious ways of thinking. Okay. Yeah, let me pull up Okay, I don't know if we need too many more pictures. I really like the way the pictures fit with the story in the book. So now here's part 3, and the part 3 is the best part, because this is why I am optimistic that there's going to be peace in our lifetimes. I want to share with you a vision of what is almost certainly going to be what happens in the future. And the book's title, Bent Towards Justice, came from something that Martin Luther King and maybe others have said, which is that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. My experience in medicine teaches me that anytime you see conflicts between people in two groups, you're probably dealing with good people in both groups who have misjudgments about each other. When I talk to insurers, the doctors tell me the insurers don't care about patients. All they care about is money. When I went to teach insurers about getting patients access to these expensive medicines, one of the insurers came up to me at the break and said, "Steve, I can tell you're one of the good doctors, but you don't understand. Doctors are not prescribing these costly medicines because people need them. They're prescribing them because the doctors are getting donuts from the drug companies, and the doctors don't want the donuts to stop." And I'm like, oh my God, that's fascinating. The insurer's understanding of the doctors was just as warped as the doctor's understanding of the insurer. I am absolutely convinced that the Israelis, Palestinians, Americans, they all want the same thing. They want peace, they want security, they want justice. The guy who beat me in that congressional race is a gun manufacturer. And I am absolutely convinced that he wants peace, security, and justice just as much as I do. He believes we can get to peace by killing the bad guys on the other side. Now, I don't think that was Jesus's thinking. I think we get to peace actually by being peaceful. So all these people love their children. They want to give their children a peaceful, secure future. So really, I'm optimistic because all of the people, all the parties, really, they want the same thing. And right now in Gaza, I think we're watching the Edmund Pettus Bridge of Selma again. It's horrifying to watch. I guess I could pull up a picture of that if I pull up the share again. Let's see, share the PowerPoint presentation. Am I sharing my screen or the wrong one again? Or the right one?
It's correct. Looks good.
Oh, excellent. By the way, these are the two daughters of these two gentlemen. These two girls were killed. You could see they died early in life because of this violence. Okay. Yeah. So people, they want to work together. They want peace. And we're dealing with, with families, and their all goals are basically the same. This is that Edmund Pettus Bridge thing that changed America. In our lifetime, segregation ended. It's like we saw a miracle happen in America. When I was born, it was segregated here. And now it's unthinkable that we would separate blacks and whites. To me, it's unthinkable we would try to separate people on the basis of religion as well. Martin Luther King, he led a bus boycott. And I think what we're seeing now is a growing, peaceful boycott movement. We're seeing young people on campuses who are not anti-Semitic, just the opposite. They have learned the lesson of the Holocaust, and they are standing for equal treatment, for peace and justice for everybody in equal measure. And yet, if you ask Israelis, they will tell you, the Hebrew school best friend in Hebrew school lives in Israel, raised his family in Israel. And he thinks my belief in a boycott is warfare. It's economic warfare. You're trying to hurt us. It's not anti-Semitism when we see these college students asking for, Palestinians for the violence to end. There are, I believe, very good, peace-loving, God-fearing people in Los Alamos who would stand strongly and proudly against any other injustice. And they might see what we're doing here today as anti-Semitism. You know, I think white people in the southern United States before the end of segregation, slaveholders facing abolitionists thought that abolitionists were anti-white. You know, they're not anti-white. They want equal treatment for everyone. And the biggest reason I think I'm optimistic is that I think once people realize that everyone are going to be better off when Palestinian families are allowed to return their homes and villages, and then people of all faiths can live together in peace. Because can you imagine Palestinian families are allowed to return to their homes? They live alongside Jewish families again. You have a peaceful country. I outline in detail how I think this will work out in the book. Peaceful country. You're going to have 2 billion Christians around the globe actively wanting to visit the Holy Land. And you're going to have 1.5 billion Muslims going to want to visit where Muhammad ascended from Jerusalem. You're going to have another billion Chinese people wanting to be tourists in the Holy Land. You're going to have Europeans wanting to visit the beaches of the Mediterranean. It's going to be economically better for Israelis. They're not going to have to send their kids to the army. Every single one of their kids is in the army, and every adult pretty much, is ready to be called up. I mean, they're not living in peace. If they give Palestinians what Palestinians want, peace and security and their homes back, then Israeli families will get what they want, which is peace and security for their children. And there would be an economy with jobs for everybody there. And, I think this is true, depending on, it doesn't matter whether you think of what's happening as genocide or not, whether you call it apartheid or not. It all depends on whether it's you see the vein is blue or not. Zionism. I don't like to even use the word Zionism because it means different things to different people. Growing up in Hebrew school, Zionism meant to us Jews moving to Israel to be in peace alongside other folks. Whereas Palestinians would say Zionism is trying to create a state run by and for Jews in a land where Palestinian families were the majority, by expelling those Palestinian families from their home and making them refugees. This is the Haggadah, the Passover book that we use to pray from. And this, you could see in big writing, is the big words of the Passover Seder, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim. Next year in Jerusalem. It does not say next year in Jerusalem by making peaceful non-Jewish families refugees from their homes. It does not say that. No rabbi is going to tell you next year in Jerusalem because we want to expel peaceful Palestinian families and make them refugees. No. So, there's this 2 ways of looking at Zionism, and people use it so differently. Each side sees it from their blue vein perspective. But I think we can all agree on the golden rule. We can all agree we should treat everybody as equals. It's fine to have a Jewish state. I don't mind a Jewish state as long as you don't do it by expelling peaceful non-Jewish families and keeping them refugees from their home and killing tens of thousands of men, women, and children. I lie in bed at night and I think about this profound love I have for my wife of 42 years and our kids. And I see that same love in American families wherever I look. And I saw that same love between Palestinian parents and their children and, among my Israeli relatives. And I saw it in those Palestinian parents and their children in their homes and in their refugee camps. And it horrifies me, someone whose worldview was shaped, by the Holocaust of what the Germans did to my Jewish family, to the Jewish people in Eastern Europe. And I think about how Palestinian families are suffering, how those families who love their children as much as I love my family, and how those parents are being killed and their children are being blown apart and buried in rubble with our support. I was at a camp at basically a libertarianish, a freedom festival in Las Vegas last summer before the election. And they had three presidential candidates, one of whom was the Constitutional Party candidate who was very much pro-life. And he said in the most profound way that, the blood of those million aborted babies are screaming, crying out to God from the grave, from the dirt, for vengeance. And then he was asked, within the three candidates, the Libertarian, the Green, and this Constitution Party candidate, were asked about Israel-Palestine. And the Libertarian Party candidate, bless him, said, we should not be supporting this violence. And the Green Party candidate, bless her, she's Jewish. She said, we should not be supporting the violence against Palestinians. But then they got to the Constitutional Party candidate who says, well, sometimes there's a just war. And I'm thinking, the blood of those Palestinian children are crying to God from the grave to forgive this guy for his opinions about their deaths. So, you look at, let's see, I want to get back to where, here. You look at these photos of what's happening in Gaza, the destruction that Israel, by the way, Israel killed more, like Hamas killed 1,000 Israelis. Israel killed over 1,000 Palestinians multiple times in the past. This is not some unique situation here. 1,000 Israelis being killed. It's 1,000 human lives. Israel, has almost made it numb to 1,000. But here's what Gaza, is what Israel is doing to Gaza. I imagine is like what the Germans, did to Jewish areas in Poland. This is what Palestine looked like in 1947. The white areas are areas that were predominantly had a Jewish majority, and then this is what the how the UN would suggested the country be divided, although it didn't say, we'll put all the Jews over here and all the Palestinians over there, non-Jews over there. It said, both sides, people have to be treated equally. Then after 48, this is what was left of Palestine, and this is the Bantustans that you have today. Okay, so it's I don't know what Israel's thinking. It's not hard. It's hard for me to imagine how deep the hatred must be, that the violence that is being engendered by what Israel is doing. It's certainly not hard for me to think that what Israel is doing in the name of Jews would inflame anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not talking about what my local representative, Virginia Fox, calls anti-Semitism, students on campus speaking out against ending violence towards Palestinians. That's not anti-Semitism. I'm talking about Jew hatred. When Israel does this to peaceful Palestinian families, Muslim families, Christian families, I think they're stoking Jew hatred. I think when we support it, we are stoking anti-American sentiment throughout the world. But I know, and I am absolutely certain about this, that Israelis and those who support what Israel is doing, they want peace every bit as much as I do. I just don't think their goal of achieving peace can be achieved by slaughtering other human lives. I had two best friends give me great gifts. One was my future brother-in-law telling me I had bad breath. I worked on that, and then I married his sister. The other was my best friend, Alan Fleischer. We were partners for so many years. He heard my first psoriasis talk, and he said to me, Steve, that talk was miserable. You could do better than that. And I worked it, and I became, in dermatology, one of the, somebody who could give a really great talk about psoriasis. So it's a great gift when you tell a friend that they're doing something wrong. So I'm not saying we should end our friendship with Israel. And I don't want us to end support for safety and security of my relatives and other Jews. But I would like to see us end our unconscionable support for Israel's violence. I want to see us peacefully boycott, divest, and sanction until our Israeli friends repatriate Palestinian families to their homes. I want to see us invest in rebuilding those homes and villages instead of spending money on bombs. I think we could put the people of Ohio and Michigan to work building, prefab houses instead of bombs. I think the engineers at Los Alamos could. I'm pretty sure the folks who built those bombs, that went off in Hiroshima, they were looking for peace. I'm not even sure they wanted us to use those bombs, but I think they were doing it because they thought this, if you have this, you prevent war. At least I'm sure that's what they're thinking. I want us and our children to see a day when people, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 100 years ago, when Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Muslims, and Palestinian Jews were all living together peacefully. In fact, remember what the rabbi says in the book? The Jews were a continuous presence in the Holy Land for 2,000 years. And the large majority of Muslims and Christians living there were not throwing those Jews into the sea. We didn't start having problems until we Jews started trying to create a country run by and for Jews in this land where there was a non-Jewish majority. So look, people are pessimistic about the future. I'm optimist. I see good people on both sides whose goals are the same, and I see this across all conflicts. My wife wants to get rid of guns in America. She wants to get rid of guns to make our children safer. And the people who want to reduce restrictions on guns and put guns in schools, they want to make our children safer. They all want the same thing. They just, have different ways of trying to get there. And they need to talk to each other more, I think. Both leaders on both sides say, I deplore violence, but that's the only thing the other side will listen to. I'm optimistic because we've seen miracles. Not only do Jews live safely in Germany, my kids, one of my older son and his wife traveled to Vietnam. We're friends with Vietnam. Gay marriage is the law of the land. 20 years ago, didn't look like that was going to happen anytime soon. South Africa gave up apartheid, and you can't tell me that Israeli Jews are more evil than South African Afrikaners. They gave up their bad system. I'm sure Israelis can do the same. We gave up institutionalized segregation. When I went to medical school at Duke, there were twice as many bathrooms and twice as many water fountains as a building needed in the old building that we had our classes in. And some of those bathrooms were really big and some were really small. And one day I realized those big ones were the white bathrooms and those small ones had to be the black bathrooms. It's unthinkable today that we would have separate bathrooms for whites and blacks. And I'm hopeful that it's going to be unthinkable to you that we would separate people on the basis of religion. I don't think any two-state separate but unequal solution is what we need. I don't think that would be the right situation in the U.S. South. I don't think we would have accepted separate Bantustans for blacks in South Africa. As Martin Luther King said, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it's the presence of justice. The arc of that moral universe is long, it's bending towards justice. I think we're going to see the day when Israel will apologize to Palestinian families. They're going to repatriate those villages. Those villages will be rebuilt. And, people are going to be living together peacefully. They're going to have to build multiple international airports, the busiest airports in the world, to handle all the people coming to visit Israel when it becomes a truly Jewish, a morally Jewish state, a state where all people are treated equally, regardless of their religion. And that is the end of part 3 when it happens anyway.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got some questions. Addie, can you grab the question? While we're grabbing a question from the audience, I have a question that we're asking all of our speakers for this series. Mm-hmm. And it's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who you've already talked about, said, peace is not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. In that spirit, what does justice for the Palestinians look like to you?
Yeah, I'd want to treat them the way I'd want to be treated. It's letting them return to their homes and villages, rebuilding those villages. A lot of those villages were turned into forests. The villages are still there. Those trees I helped plant are sitting on top of them. you can rebuild those villages. You could, if an Israeli family is living in the house, you could offer the Palestinian a fair compensation package. And if they say, no, they don't want the compensation package, they want their house. Since you've agreed that it's a fair compensation package, you could give it to the Israeli family, the Jewish family, and let them move out. Or if both families want to live in the house, we put the engineers of Los Alamos to work designing how you would put a second story on these houses, and they would both live there and their children would play together and everybody would be happy. Yeah, I don't think any two-state solution is workable, because if you have a separate Palestinian state where the Palestinians are not allowed to return to their homes, you don't have justice, you're not going to have happy Palestinians, and the ways of killing people are getting better and better all the time with drones and bioweaponry, and it's not going to be a stable situation. So you have to let Palestinian families return to their homes. There has to be one state where they're all living. I take it back. No, wait. Two states could work. Yes. One state for the religious Jews, Christians, and Muslims, right? Who don't want the gays to have parades, who don't want their girls to show their belly buttons, who want to restrict what they do on what day of the week and what foods they eat. And the other state for the secular Jews, Christians, and Muslims who don't care about any of that stuff. That would be a totally rational two-state solution. And you could see how that would eliminate a lot of conflicts between people. One side, they could have abortions, one side wouldn't have abortions, and they would live their lives in peace separately. Okay. To me, that would be a reasonable two-state solution, because there is far less difference between religious Jews, Christians, and Muslims than there are between the secular, but yeah, there's less religious Jews, Christians, and Muslims are basically identical. You wouldn't be able to tell them apart. All of them, the women cover their heads and stuff, all of them. Even the Jewish ones, they wear wigs. They don't show their hair. But the difference between a secular one and a religious, totally different culture, And so that would be a rational. I don't think we need that. I think we could all live together in peace. We could figure out the religious differences and, work that out.
Thank you. And we've got a
Dude, we
question
do
from
that
the-
here. We got Christians, Muslims, and Jews living all together in peace. What makes us think they can't live together? We know they can live together.
Exactly. Great point. So we've got a question from the audience. It says, what do you think about must be expelled because they want to expel Israelis from Palestine? In other words, each party says we need to eliminate the other side before they eliminate us. Doesn't this preclude the two sides from living together?
No. They say that because each one misjudges the other side. Each side thinks the other side is evil. Each side thinks the other side wants to kill the other side, when in fact, what both sides want is peace, security for their children. And if they saw that if the Israelis saw that, hey, we could have peace for our children if we just let Palestinian families return to their homes. We made a big mistake expelling them from their homes in the first place. If we hadn't done that, then we'd be living together peacefully. Let's apologize. If Netanyahu would be because only Nixon could go to China, right? So if Netanyahu said to to Hamas, we made a big mistake. Come back. We'll rebuild your villages. It'll be one vote for everybody, equal votes, and you'll be the majority. We'll live together in peace. Hamas, undoubtedly, we say, sure. In fact, if people talk about how evil the Hamas folks are and how their charter is evil. Read Article 31 of the original Hamas charter. It says, very specifically, Jews, Christians, and Muslims can live together in peace under the shadow of Islam. And it sounds ominous, the shadow of Islam. When I was in the West Bank, I visited in Hebron, the house where the Palestinian youth movement was. And it's sitting in the backyard of the house, and it's stinking hot. I'm talking, the sun is pouring down. And I'm under a tree, and it's shady, and it's really nice under the shade. when it says the shadow of Islam, it was translated from the Arabic, right, to shadow of Islam, but it could have been translated for a northern, a Northern American or Northern European audience into this, because you talk about the sunshine of Christianity. The sunshine of Christianity and the shadow of Islam mean the same thing. It's just when you're in a really hot environment, shadow is good and sunshine is oppressive.
Mm. I love that. Do we have any other? We've got a question here.
I really don't have a question, but I have a comment. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, in a Jewish neighborhood. We have people on our street who are Jewish and Catholic and Protestant, and it was everything in the neighborhood was based on respect. So my mother would say, "Now remember, it's a important day for the Jews, so be quiet when you walk by their house," And so for Jewish holidays, the neighbors always gave us special food, Jewish food, and at Christmas we always gave them, big platters of cookies, and it. I think looking back on it, it was kind of idyllic because I didn't think about ever them and us. And I know my husband here, Jeff, came to one of my high school reunions, and he goes, "They're all Jewish?" I said, "Well, pretty much." And but it was never a dividing point. It was, there were black kids, because the school was in New York State. Schools were integrated at the beginning of the 60s. So by the time I got in high school, I went to an elementary school where I think everybody was white. And then in the high school, we had black kids, and you're going to have black kids, and you're going to have to, and they just put us in a room and, basically we're students. We have this in common. We get along. Black kids have a better sense of humor than white kids. I mean, they were very funny. And I can't think of one whether it be or a racial difference where it was an issue, because they just told us to sort of figure it out, and we did. And I think it's one of the biggest gifts I ever had in my life, because I was in a parking lot once, and a friend says to me, "Oh, there's a black guy over there." I said, "Yeah." She says, "Well, what do you think he's doing?" And I said, "He's probably going to his car." And she says, "Well, I don't know, in here." I mean, she was like freaked out, and it's she just didn't have any experience. I thought it was really naive, or I don't know if I have a word for it, but the fact is that the more we connect and the more we learn about each other and value our differences, be it tradition or whatever, that I think we'll all be served to be connected in a way that allows us to see each other as similar and to care about each other. So I feel very blessed having that high school experience, because it really changed my view for the rest of my life. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, that was a great gift. And the fact that you're taught about respect, I think, is just beautiful. Yeah, absolutely, just beautiful. To have an experience where you think one thing about people in another group, and then you go and find, oh, it's nothing like that. It just opens your eyes to this whole idea of gosh, all of these different groups, marketing and salespeople, different groups, you know, they, wherever you see these different groups, there's certain advantages to putting people in groups, but it creates potential for conflict that we have to be on the lookout for.
Hello, Steve. This is Tina, the minister at the Unitarian Church. Thanks again for being here. My question is are you familiar with Jonathan Kutub's Beyond the Two-State Solution book document? And if so, what are your thoughts? Also, for reference, Jonathan Kutub is an international human rights attorney, a Palestinian born, now lives in America, Christian, who also runs for America. And he also was, let me make sure this is correct, the head of the legal committee of the Palestinian delegation negotiating the Cairo Interim Agreement of 1994 between Israel and the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization. So he's written Beyond the Two-State Solution document book. You can get it free online. You can look up Jonathan Kutub. So I just didn't know if you were familiar with that and your thoughts.
Yeah, I have not read that book. I look forward to downloading it as soon as we're done.
I saw him speak in Albuquerque right after the October 7th horrificness. And he was already scheduled to be down there and presented about his book, and it was really informative. And I think it'd be a great dialogue starter even in communities. So just, yeah.
Thank you.
We've got two more
Hi,
people.
thank you so much for your talk, and thank you for the beautiful book you wrote. I have a question about, I'm a Christian, and when I've done Bible studies, one of the things that we run into is in the book of Deuteronomy, issues a command to the Jews to kill the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, kill them all, men, women, and children, take no prisoners, burn their land, slaughter their cattle, have nothing to do with these people. And the Jewish people were unable to carry that out completely. And what I've been taught in Bible studies is that the reason God gave that command is because he didn't people to become impure and take on the customs and the beliefs of an impure people. But for whatever reasons, the Jewish people could not bring themselves to do it. And there are some people, evangelical Christians and some Jews that I've spoken to, who believe that the reason we have all the problems we have in the Middle East today is because the Jewish people failed to carry out God's command back in the Old Testament. I would like to know what your take on that is.
Yeah, I think those people also believe in the golden rule. And if they thought about it for a moment, if they saw pictures of those young children, they'd be like, this doesn't make sense. You know, we shouldn't be slaughtering families. You know, they love their kids just as much as we do. I'm optimistic about folks. I don't think when they think about it for a few minutes, they wouldn't be movable. I mean, we gave up slavery in America. We gave up segregation. The idea that thoughts like those would win the day, I think, is just not. It doesn't seem realistic to me. I think it's far more realistic to think that the arc of the arc of moral justice is things are bending in the right direction. And I think those are good folks, you know. I'm so optimistic because I just haven't met the person yet who says, you know, I really believe we need to slaughter other families because I'm evil. You know, I hear people say, it's really horrible what's happening, but the Palestinians will be better off when we finally get rid of Hamas, and this is the only way to do it. You know, it's just so misguided.
Thank you. We've got another question in the audience.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm the person who knows what nachis is. So you deserve your own nachis for all the research you have done. So I agree with a lot of what you've said. I also disagree with a lot of what you said, and I'm confused by some of what you've said, and I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into one of those items. And if I can preface it, I've been doing some genealogy, and my family is originally from Lithuania, modern day Lithuania. And just a few months ago, of where my grandparents lived, my grandparents and my great-grandparents, in Kaunas, which is a big city in Lithuania. Google Maps, I looked it up. It's a parking lot. There is no house there anymore. The whole neighborhood was destroyed during the war, so there is no house to go back to. So when you were raising the issue of returning to one's home, it struck a note because I thought, well, maybe I'll visit someday and stand where it used to be, you know, where the house used to be. But I don't think I could go back. I don't think I could, whoever owns that house, say, okay, I'm going to build my house here, or you're, you know, it's just not realistic. It's as if, you know, San Ildefonso land or Pueblan land, and it's not going back to those original people. So I would like you to maybe discuss a little bit more how your vision for peace, if it involves this repatriation of Palestinians back into Tel Aviv, presumably Iraqi Jews back to Baghdad or whatever.
Only if they want to go back.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
If they want to go back to Baghdad, I'd be totally supportive if that's what they want.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think they want to go back to Baghdad. Yeah. So
well, yeah,
just
no,
think
I'm just saying that that's a realist. I think you've hit on kind of the key stumbling block.
No, I don't think it's a stumbling block.
Well,
it may be a mental stumbling block. So I think it's unrealistic to think that we're going to get to peace spending billions and billions of dollars on bombs. I just don't think that's going to bring peace. I think it's far more realistic to just do a simple calculation. What are we spending on weapons per year? $10 billion per year on the weaponry and support. And there's like a million, let's say a million Palestinian families want to return. And so you say, oh, let's do it over 5 years. That's $50 billion. That's $50,000 for each Palestinian family. So for each Palestinian family who wants to return, we have $50,000 available in money we won't be spending on weapons to support, you know, the people of Ohio and Michigan to build prefab housing that would work in the Palestinian Israeli environment. So that there would be money and resources to rebuild. You'd have human resource to rebuild. You wouldn't need every Israeli teenager becoming a soldier. Instead, you could have them become plumbers and electricians, and those Palestinian kids doing the same thing, building infrastructure. And all of that is before you have the far larger economic benefit of a peaceful Holy Land that becomes the world's greatest tourist attraction. And so I don't think there's any, I mean, Israel says, hey, it's no problem if there's a million Russian Jews who want to return. We can bring them in, no problem. Oh, but we can't take one Palestinian. No, of course they can bring these people back and rebuild. The resources would certainly be there to do that in a peaceful land. It's far more practical than killing people.
Oh, I agree that, but it's not a monetary, right? I mean, people want, they have the key, have the key to their home.
Yeah.
That's one of the symbols of the Palestinian resistance, is the key to their home in what is now Tel Aviv, which is now the joke is the Silicon Valley of the Russian Silicon Valley is in Tel Aviv. That's the,
Yeah.
because
So
yeah.
again,
So
the
Tel Aviv
Palestinian
is a-
family
is
has the
a-
key to the home. And I think we discussed this earlier. The Palestinian family has the key to their home. The Israelis will offer them a fair settlement package. The settlement package, an amount of money to say, here, there's already a family living in this home. You can take the home, or we'll give you this very generous settlement package if you'll live somewhere else. And if that Palestinian family says, I don't want the settlement package, then the Israelis say to the Russian family, hey, they don't want this massive settlement package. Hey, do you want to take it? Because we'll give it to you, and we'll give you a different home in the West Bank, or maybe send you back to Russia if you prefer to go back to Russia, but you'll have all this money to go back with. Do you want it? And if they say, no, I want the home too, well, then you just have to rebuild. You just have to build another floor. You have to make it so that both. And then if there's a conflict and they just can't agree, then you go to the arbiter. And the arbiter would be those two guys from the parent circle, or some other pair of people from the parent circle whose children have been killed in this conflict. And I don't think anybody's going to want to argue with them when they come to their decision.
Okay. Are there any other questions? We've got, I'll say 6 minutes before we need to wrap up. We got another question.
Oh,
in the
we've got
chat.
6 more minutes. Y'all have been very patient with me.
Well,
I've
we're a
never had
little
somebody
over
listen to me
time.
for 2 hours before. My mom wouldn't listen to me for 2 hours.
Hi, thank you for coming. Well, showing up. I know it's a little late in North Carolina, so appreciate it. I wanted to ask, what year did you start the Promised Land Museum? And what were the steps that you needed to take to get it up and running and do the research behind that?
Yeah, the research was easy. It's the internet. It's like a sweater that has a loose thread, and you just start pulling on it, and it just keeps coming and coming. And Wikipedia takes you to another page, and you just keep following this trail. And you, being the scientist that I am, I want to see the original documents, and I track those down. I can't remember what year. I started in the late 90s feeling different about things. By 2005, I was writing things about, how we're going about this all wrong, how we have good people on both sides. It was probably one of the Israeli slaughters of Palestinians, over 1,000 people, that made me, share the museum. There's a creative guy in town who's a fabulous creative person, can do in website development. And I just hired, being a dermatologist, I have disposable income. So I'm not afraid to spend it on this project because I want to make the world better for my kids, just like everybody else does. And so I just hired him to, create the website, and I provided him the documents and things that make the website possible. It's an easy thing to spread the word. And we had the idea for banners, and I had the idea that, what we need to bring television sets, so that, people can, you got that movie of Palestine. It was like the first movie ever made by the Lumiere brothers. I don't know if you saw it in the museum, but Elliot, the creative guy, says, nah, don't forget the television sets. That's going to be too tough. We'll just put a QR code to it, because people carry a television set in their pocket. So you could see that Lumiere video just by clicking on the QR code on that banner, so that we would have both an in-person opportunity through these banners and make the information available to anybody, anywhere. But one of the things I learned in medicine is that you cannot convince a patient to take a medicine by giving them all the data. Okay. If I want a patient to, they got acne and they need isotretinoin to cure their acne, I'm not going to try to convince mom with all the data that I've got on the efficacy and safety. It just doesn't work. Again, the human brain did not evolve to manage numbers. It evolved to manage stories. And if I just tell a patient, I had another patient, you remind me of them. they did really well. Your skin disease is so similar to theirs. They did great on this one drug. I mean, it's just unbelievably convincing, one story like that. And so then I thought, okay, the museum with all of this evidence, and I presented it to the rabbi here in Winston-Salem, and he was just as, dismissive of it as the rabbi in the story, because there's very little in this story that didn't actually happen. The data doesn't move people. So now it's in the form of one story that hopefully, will make people see, that could happen. I think most people don't present an optimistic view of the future. They don't see what would happen. They're thinking about these two-state solutions that are totally not workable because neither side would be happy. If you show what would happen if you end the segregation, if you end the apartheid, if you really truly end it and have justice, people would live together better than they're living now.
Awesome. Okay, I want to ask you one last question, and you've got about 90 seconds to answer it. But the question is, in your book, Bent Towards Justice, you describe how societies move towards equity over time. What role can everyday people outside of governments and institutions play in bending the arc towards justice for Palestinians?
Yeah, it's got to be boycott, divestment, and sanctions. You got to, I think of it as chemistry. You got to get over this activation barrier. For Israelis to see that they will be better off when they let Palestinians return to their homes, they're going to have to feel the pain of being sanctioned by the world the way South Africa did. And I think that's what it's going to take. I'm going to just share those final slides. They were living together in peace before 1917. It's not like we're creating a new wheel. It's been created before. They can play together. They're the same. They're just kids, and it's just almost certainly what the future is going to bring. And by the way, this was the only time that a Palestinian held a blade at my neck. I mentioned that at the beginning. I wanted to talk to Palestinians. I went to a barbershop, got a haircut. Let me just say thank you to y'all. I want to thank the organizers of this event. Organizing an event like this one is not easy, especially when you're an empathetic person. Even when it's not controversial, it's hard to do. But when you're an empathetic, caring person, and other leaders in the community are telling you your event could foment violence against Jewish people, it just makes it that's so much harder. I thank you so much for putting this event together, this week together. We Jews have an expression that fits here. Yasher koach. You did well. It's the way we say well done, when in Jewish context after someone performs a mitzvah, and it's particularly apt here. I salute your commitment to peace and justice for Palestinian families in equal measure to your commitment to peace and justice for Jewish ones. And to those of you in the audience, I want to give you special thanks because you came here, tonight. You may have felt ignorant about Israel-Palestine, wanted to learn more. I hope you take what you learned, share it with others, and act as these organizers have to end the mistreatment of Palestinian families. The idea of calling your congressperson every day is just a beautiful suggestion. And finally, now this may sound weird, I want to thank those in the community who had the strength and motivation to actively try to stop this event. Those people did not do it out of indifference, much less malevolence to the suffering of our brothers and sisters in Gaza. The people who tried to stop this event from happening are motivated to try to make the world better for our children. And they are the kind of people who don't just stand by in the face of what they perceive as a potential threat to the community. They acted on their beliefs. They took the wrong action, in my humble opinion, but they are good folks who will undoubtedly someday see the light, and they will transform their passion for the protection of Jews to a passion for the protection, for the peace, justice, and security for all the people of the Holy Land, God willing, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. We so appreciate you being here tonight. And I'm going to let you head off to bed. I know you're 2 hours ahead of us. So thank you for being here. We so appreciate it.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.